And now we're going to hear from Wayne. Wayne, for those of you that don't know, has been around Southminster for quite some time now and has been an important voice for us, always keeping us mindful and leading the task force that we have on exploring our role in combating climate change and all the issues therein. So Wayne really has been an important person in our midst, shaping our understanding of climate change and global warming. So Wayne, thank you for agreeing to be a part of this, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Don. It's a good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. In fact, it's an honor to be with you here this morning. And I'd like you to sit back and imagine a gigantic banquet. Hundreds of millions of people come to eat. They eat and drink to their heart's content, eating food that is better and more abundant than at the finest tables in ancient Athens or Rome, or even in the palaces of medieval Europe. Then, one day, a Waitperson arrives wearing a white dinner jacket. And the Waitperson says, "Here's your bill." Not surprisingly, the diners are in shock. Some begin to deny that this is their bill, and others deny that there even is a bill. And still others deny that they partook of the meal. One diner suggests that, this person holding the bill isn't really a Waitperson. He's just trying to get some kind of attention, or he wants money for some kind of personal projects. Finally, the group concludes, well, we'll just simply ignore this person and the bill, it's going to go away. Well, this is where the world stands today on the subject of the climate crisis. For the past 150 years, our industrial civilization has been dining on the energy stored in fossil fuels, and the bill has come due. Yet we have sat around the dinner table, denying that this is our bill, doubting the credibility of the Waitperson who delivered it. You know, the great economist John Maynard Keynes famously summarized all of his economic theory in a single phrase: there is no such thing as a free lunch. And he was right. We have experienced prosperity unmatched in human history. We have feasted to our heart's content, but the lunch was not free. Well, we are part of the hundreds of millions of banqueteers. How are we going to pay this bill? It sounds rather unnerving to think of ourselves as part of that crowd, but I have been trying to find out how I can help pay my share of the bill, because it's not just my share I'm concerned about. I want to pay for my kids and my grandchildren and their children's children. And as a steward of the earth, I want to share 3 possible ways that we might help pay the bill. These ideas are based on my participation in the 9th American Climate Leadership Summit 2020. I virtually participated in the summit because of the United Presbyterian Church Mission Agency. The Presbyterians have been involved in support and promote this program. The summit included a broad mix of supporters representing environmental activists, church leaders from other denominations, political figures, youth activists, researchers, and scientists. So, what did I learn about how to pay our bill? The first way that we can help pay for our feast is to acknowledge that we have been feasting and understand the problems that this has caused. How can we do that? One answer was suggested by one of the summit leaders, Dr. Leah Scans, assistant professor of preaching and worship at Lexington Theological Seminary. She said, we can draw much from our Christian scriptures, liturgy, and rituals. What might we use from our traditions to deal with this climate crisis? Well, for example, her idea grew out of the book of Lamentations. This book includes 5 short poems that describe the intense loss by the Jews when the temple was destroyed, and they were taken into exile by the Babylonians. She described how Jerusalem's inhabitants experienced the devastation of their city, their temple, their livelihood, the loss of their feasts and celebrations. No one was there to help them. They felt that God had forsaken them and had punished them for their exorbitance and denied them the ability to enjoy the fruits of their field. And the last few verses of the poem are a prayer for mercy. The writer laments in chapter 5, "You, Lord, reign forever. Your throne endures from generation to generation. Why do you always forget us? Restore us to yourself, Lord, that we may return. Renew our days as of old. Unless you have utterly rejected us and are angry with us beyond measure." As I reviewed these passages, I could not help but think about the many people who have no home because of the terrible wildfires or the floods or the hurricanes across our country. The churches, stores, schools are all gone from their communities. Some friends and family have died. Their family, friends, and neighbors are being cared for by strangers, and the government now provides them with shelter, food, and clothing. They are denied the opportunity to be personally comfortable with others because of COVID-19. And they find themselves asking God to restore them to himself so that they can renew our days as of old. Theologian Walter Brueggemann warns us, as a people, we have neglected the lament pieces. We are ill-equipped for the loss we are facing in society. We keep pretending and denying that that's not happening to us. There are additional interpretations from Lamentations from Brueggemann. He explains that we have 3 main teachings from Lamentations: identify the problem, define the moral and ethical sins related to the problem, and do something about the problem. Well, we can easily identify the problem created by the use of fossil fuels, and we can even find the moral and ethical sins related to our condition. As we deal with these problems, we can be overcome when we see that the problem is immense and complex. We also can become dispirited by the extent of the damage done to those with a minimum income, limited or no health insurance, or who happen to live in a country which is losing its shoreline that's coming from the encroaching ocean, eating up the land. Our attention should be focused on doing something, acting on the problem, as God renews our days. Dr. Skadz also suggested a word that would resonate with us: tithing, the giving of 10% of our wealth to serve God. However, she refocused the idea on the environment by naming it creation tithing. 2 environmental writers have defined this as a program for houses of worship and their members to reduce greenhouse gases by 10% each year through a dedicated focus on reducing the worst consumer generated emitters: electricity, gas, heating oil, water, and automobile fuel. It involves the church, clergy, and the congregation. Dr. Skadz suggested that the reduction commitment or creation tithing could be as high as 25%. Take a deep breath. That would be something that Southminster could achieve. The Presbyterian Church USA has already provided us with the tools of providing us a way to do creation tithing. And it starts with a booklet called The Guide to Going Carbon Neutral. What is the second way that we can pay for our feast? We can accept and must accept our part in helping to right the inequities that have caused others to suffer from all sorts of unjust environmental policies and programs and conditions. For example, we have been repeatedly made aware of the unfair effect of the COVID-19 virus, the wildfires, earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes. We've all become appalled by the daily account of the minorities that are suffering from the pandemic. The time is right for us to expand our relationships with environmental justice organizations. Presbyterians were challenged to correct these inequities now by the Reverend Jose Gonzalez Colon at a peace camp sponsored by the Presbyterian Peace Fellowship just this last June. He is pastor of the Iglesia Presbiteriana de Hato Rey in Puerto Rico. He spoke about a planet to save and very little time. The biblical text that he used to illustrate his views on this subject came from Revelation 3:14 through 17. These passages say, the revelator chastises a Christian community for their indifference. Listen to this. I know your works. You're neither cold or hot. I wish you were either cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm, neither cold or hot, I am about to spit you out of my mouth, says the Lord. For you say, I am rich, I have prospered, I need nothing. You do not realize that you are wretched, you are pitiable, you are poor, you are blind, and you are naked. He said, repentance is not taking place because we have been convinced that there is no other way to preserve our life without fossil fuels. And there you have the false idol, the false sense of prosperity, the false sense of security that we're dealing with inside and outside the church. It is the Pharaoh. Fossil fuels is the enslaving Pharaoh of our day. Reverend Jose reminded his audience that communities of color have to deal with this fact that the climate breakdown makes us even more sick, makes us poorer, and even more miserable. Lamenting that the COVID-19 pandemic is showing us how the Native American, African American, Latinx communities show a disproportionate amount of infections in the US today. These same issues were presented at another session, Getting to a Just Future, Addressing Climate Disparities. Two African American climate leaders, Professor Carlton Waterhouse, Professor of Property and Environmental Law at Howard Law School, and James Woodley, President of Jail and Prison Rehabilitation Information Program, both suggested several effective ways to create environmental justice. In short, practice allyship and advocate across racial and ethnic groups, across class, location, and national boundaries. In order to increase our knowledge about minorities involved in environmental issues, we might also join with a local church whose national office supported the American Climate Leadership Summit. A contributing member that fits that definition is the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Portland. The third way that we can pay for the creation of climate crisis is by persevering in the face of negative forces. We are faced by many negative forces that don't acknowledge or belittle the science evidence on climate crisis. They are the same forces that fight various efforts to reduce the presence of greenhouse gases. It is clear that those individuals and organizations that support environmental justice are faced with formidable pushback. Even though 67% of American voters report feeling more concerned about climate crisis from the previous election, it is obvious that attempting to address climate change is going to continue to be challenged. Well, there you are. It's time for all of us to take the climate crisis seriously. It is a time to be all in for a livable planet with a healthy global citizens and justice for all. It isn't going to be easy because the solutions demand our personal commitment. There is no simple single solution. So to encourage you to consider your future steps, I'd like to read from the Spirit of the Pioneers, because in a sense, we are now the pioneers of the future. We can't control the future, but we can shape it and enhance the possibilities for children and grandchildren. We can't discern the present, in the present, the fullness of our actions and their impact, but we can be pioneers in our time, exploring fully the crevices and cracks where knowledge and new insights might be found. We can explore our spectrum of relationships and confront our complacency and certainties about the way things are. We can dare to face ourselves in our entirety, to understand our pain, to feel the tears, to listen to our frustration and confusion, and to discover new capabilities and capacities that will empower and transform us. We can't change the past, but we can learn from it and build on it. In the spirit of the pioneer, let us now go forth. Thank you.